I don't know what your family's like. I don't think it could possibly be as bad as Jacob's family. There's no way in the world. God had to remove Joseph from that family in order to save that family. He had to take him miles and miles away. Here's a guy who, at the age of 17, his family threw him out. Not just threw him out, sold him into slavery. Sent him down to Egypt. Told Daddy he was eaten by some wild animal. Here's his coat. It's got blood all over it. And so Dad, for all these years, Daddy has been deceived into thinking that Joseph is dead. First thing Joseph does, he goes down there, and we've gone over this story. He's sent into Egypt. He's sold to Potiphar as a slave to Potiphar. And the neat thing about Joseph doesn't seek power. Joseph doesn't seem to jump after opportunity or climb the ladder. God has gifted him with talents, the ability of organization and administration. And Potiphar recognizes that, and he puts him over his household. And God blesses the household because of it. But even in the midst of sin, Potiphar's wife makes advances toward him, and as a result, I don't even think Potiphar believed that Joseph was responsible for it. Maybe he did. He probably knew what his wife, you guys know, but he throws him into a prison. And even in the prison, Joseph's talents bloom, and the word of the prison recognizes his talents. He becomes administrator of the prison. It's just there. It's not something he's seeking. He just got it. God has gifted him with it. And he also has the ability of dreams. He's had his own dreams, and he has this ability to interpret dreams, and he gets some dreams in the prison. And he spends all these years in that prison, from 17 years of age till he's 30 years of age. He's either in Potiphar's household or probably Potiphar's prison underneath his own house. And he's enslaved at the age of 30. Pharaoh finds out that there's this guy gifted with dreams, and he's had his dreams. And he calls him up. And I read a passage about 2 chapters beyond this where it says that Joseph had become like a father to Pharaoh. I thought that was interesting. That means that there's a possibility that Pharaoh was a younger man than even Joseph. And Joseph comes forward to this young man who has these dreams, and he interprets it to him that there's going to be famine in the year for 7 years. And at the end of that 7 years, there's going to be prosperity for 7 years. Then there's going to be an incredible famine hit the land for 7 years. I wish we had some people who could interpret that in our future for our country, and we would do the right things. But Joseph tells him of what the dream means. And Pharaoh is astounded. And Joseph then throws out a suggestion. Find a wise man who can collect from the people and from the land and store it up during the good years and hold it to the bad years. And Pharaoh looks up at him and says, "Who's wiser than you? Nobody's wiser than you in the land. You're the one." And so what happens? Joseph, and we've told this story, but hear it over and over again. It's okay. Hear it over and over again. It's a wonderful story. So Joseph is put in charge for 7 years of collecting food, 5% from all the people in the land, and storing it up in storehouses for 5 years. Great administrative capacity here. And at the end of that 7 years, famine hits the land. Wham! Now Joseph has another administrative responsibility. Instead of collecting, now he's got to disperse. And he's standing in judgment over the nation. Only Pharaoh is bigger than him. Only Pharaoh is more important than him. But in reality, the people are looking up to him as the leader of the land because he's the one distributing the food. He who controls the food controls the world. And he is in control of the world. And he's sitting there. And he speaks fluent Egyptian. He looks Egyptian. There's nothing in his appearance that makes him look Semitic. He doesn't have the long beard. He doesn't have the hair. He doesn't have all the looks of a shepherd. He looks like an Egyptian. He speaks like an Egyptian. He's become like an Egyptian. But you know the one thing he hasn't let go of? Elohim, Yahweh. That's still his God. And he still worships him. And he even influences Pharaoh over this. And he believes that God is in control. He still believes in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, regardless of what his family has done to him. He clings to the promises that he has heard from his childhood. He still loves his daddy. He still loves Benjamin, but I don't think he thinks too highly of his brothers. And you know, he was a little man in a little world when he was in Canaan. He was in this little box, and he's 17 years old. All his brothers but Benjamin are older than him. And to them, they look down on him as a nothing, a nobody. Now he's in another country, and he is a big body. He is a somebody. And this is where our story begins, because I would think that Joseph would be so hateful to his brothers. And the question is, what do you do with power? He is a powerful, powerful, powerful man. He's got more power than any of you ever had, or will have, more power than I'm ever going to have. This man is powerful. Abraham Lincoln makes a statement. Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. And the character of Joseph really comes out in this next test. He has the power to destroy his brothers. What would you do if your brothers had thrown you into slavery? What would you do if they had thrown you into a pit and pronounced you dead? They even planned to kill him. Reuben stopped him, and then Judah stopped him and talked him in, no, sell him instead. What would you do? He's 38 years old now. He's been away 20-something years, 22 years. Can you imagine that? Hey, he's no little kid anymore. He's older than some of you guys. Maybe the same age as some of you. The plenty has been in the land. A whole year of poverty has occurred. And the land is in distress. And that's where we begin this story. And I don't have any major points with this. I just want you to really grasp the character of this guy and who he is. And think about the character of his brothers, too. And what that family's like. I don't know what your family's like. So when I'm going to go back to chapter 41 a little bit. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. He didn't just hand it out. What he's going to do is increase the power of the government, is what he's going to do. He's going to sell to them the merchandise. No giveies here. For the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was severe over all the earth. It's not just a regional famine. This is, in their world, a worldwide famine. It's a famine that covers the entire Middle East, at least as far up into Canaan and in all of northern Africa. So people are traveling for miles and miles to come to who? Joseph. And he's standing before them, and he's the one making the decision who to sell to and who not to sell to. That's a lot of power, folks. And Pharaoh's fortunate. Even though he's the ruler of the land, he's sitting in the back room and letting Joseph do all the work. He's a smart guy. He knows how to delegate. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" I love that. They're all just sitting around, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You know, can't shepherd the sheep too much. They can't grow grain, can't do it. So they're just in their little huddle of pity. None of them taking any leadership. And Jacob tells them, "Behold, I've heard that there is grain and to sell in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us, that we may live and not die." This guy's such a pessimist. I mean, Oh, grumbly Jacob. Everywhere you go in the whole past, everywhere you go, Jacob is always this way. He's a greedy son of a gun. And he goes, get down there and get us some food. So, of course, they're going to almost see like the Beverly Hillbillies. They load up their bags and they lead to Egypt. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brothers, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. That's interesting. Makes you wonder, maybe they really didn't trust the brothers too much. Maybe he figured in foul play with Joseph. But the thing is, Benjamin's not a little boy. 22 years have passed since Joseph was thrown into Egypt, and Benjamin was probably 2 years old or so at that time. So we're looking at a 24-year-old guy. If anybody could protect himself among all these brothers, most of these brothers are older than Joseph. They're becoming older men. Reuben and Judah are probably up in their 60s or so by this time. They're not a bunch of young folk. And of any of them who should be healthy enough to go to Egypt would be Benjamin. But Jacob's really telling us something here. I don't trust these boys. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers, spoke roughly to them. And now you got to recognize he's talking through an interpreter here. He's not talking directly to them. I can imagine, I'm looking at Joseph, he's sitting on this, he's got all these thousands of people coming to him for judgment and handing out food, and as his brothers walk in. They're 22 years older than the last time he saw them. I don't even know how he recognized him. When was the last time you went to a family, I remember my high school reunion. I didn't recognize anybody. There was a girl I dated, walked up to me and said, "Hi, David." And I said, "Hi." She says, "You don't remember who I am?" And it was my wife's best friend and roommate. Name was Rhea, and she was beautiful. She was a beautiful girl. And I really insulted her because I didn't know who she was. "You don't remember me? I'm Rhea." "Oh, yeah. I remember you. I know who you are." But you guys have been to those reunions. Nobody looks the same. And here's his brothers 22 years later. He recognized them, but they don't recognize him. These guys were big wigs back then. They're all older brothers. They're all big guys, They're worthy to be afraid of. And I can't help but him looking at them and, what was I afraid of? They look like puny little guys now. They've lived in this world so contained in Canaan amongst their family. And it's almost like people sometimes brought up in a little community in the South or something or whatever. And it's just a little bitty community. And everything seems to resolve around that little world. But Joseph's not in that world anymore. Joseph's in another world. And that world that just looked so big to him back then, or resolved around, it's just a little piece of the bigger world. You guys experienced that? Your high school, everything was revolved around your high school and your buddies, and there was no world outside of that. It was there, and all those little things going on, everything was there. And then you joined the army. Or you went off to college, or all of a sudden the world's bigger. And you look back at that community and you're going, what was that all about? Why did all that seem so big? Why the high school athlete just looked so huge back then, The football team and the coaches. And then you return and you visit them and they, wow, they're not so big. And Joseph's sitting there, and he sees his brothers walk in, and their filthy clothes, their beards, he's lived in that environment. And I don't know what he's thinking. I would think, you rotten little, really, you're the ones that threw me in the pit. You're the guys that tried to kill me. But Joseph, in his wisdom, keeps his mouth shut. Doesn't let them know who they are. They don't recognize him. Where do you come from? He says through the interpreter. From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. Remember the dream? The wheat? They're going to bow down. They just bowed down before him. They don't even know it. The dream is fulfilled. The stars and the moon and the sun are going to bow down to him. Well, they just bowed down to him. This comes to mind, but he doesn't tell them this, but he remembers the dream. And all of a sudden, the prophecies of the dream is fulfilled before his eyes. And he said to them, through the interpreter, "You're spies! You come to see the nakedness of the land." The nakedness of the land is those weak portions of the land where we can take over, where we can... it'd be like me saying, "You guys are nothing but a bunch of spies. You want to take over our church." But he throws this at them. He's harsh to them. He's mean to them. They say to him, "No, my Lord. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." He said to them, "No. It is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." And they said, "Your servants are just 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." Really? Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies." Are you grasping what he's doing? He's pulling information out of them. He's learning information about the family by playing this game, and all this time speaking through an interpreter. "By this you shall be tested, by the life of Pharaoh." And this is a figure of speech that was often used, and they found these actually in the records of Egyptian writings, that they would speak all this time as a form of swearing. "You shall go from this place unless you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, and your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else may the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. What do you do? I think he threw him right where he had been. He threw him right into Potiphar's prison house, maybe the same cells he had been into. He's showing them what he's gone through for all those years. There's some similarities between Joseph and his brothers. Number one, remember they accused him of spying. They said to him, he came to them and he had told a bad report on them to their daddy. And they said, "There's that spy. There's that one that comes telling on us." He's accusing them of being spies. They threw him into a pit. What's he do? He throws them into the pit. They denied their accusations. I'm sure he denied the accusations that he was a spy. They treated him roughly. He treats them roughly and then thrown into the pit. A lot of similarities here in a briefing of what he's gone through. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live." For I fear God. That's an interesting statement coming from an Egyptian. The word for God here is Elohim. Elohim is not, the Egyptians were polytheists. Pharaoh is perceived as the son of Re. He is a god in the eyes of the Egyptians. And Joseph is not speaking of one of their gods. He's speaking of Elohim, the God of creation. The God in Genesis chapter 1:1. I believe in the Creator Almighty. He doesn't use Yahweh. Why doesn't he use Yahweh? Well, Yahweh is not even a term probably until Moses, but looking back. So at this point, Elohim is the name. Do this and you will live, for I fear God. And he changes the sentence. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined. Notice before he's going to keep them all and send one. Now he's going to send them all and just keep one where you are in custody. And let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will be verified and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we're guilty concerning our brother, and that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen, so now there comes a reckoning for his blood. Are the brothers repenting? Are the brothers, what is going on in their minds? Maybe the fact that he said, I believe in Elohim, brought guilt upon their souls for what they had done 22 years earlier. And they're speaking these things right in front of Joseph, thinking he doesn't understand what's going on. Thinking he's an Egyptian and he doesn't grasp it. And he hears every word of it. And he's also learning that Reuben was the one that tried to stop them, which is interesting, and yet it didn't work. And the brothers are feeling guilt. Let me share something with you. Simply because something happened 22 years ago doesn't mean you can hide it. Something that may have happened 10, 20 years ago, and you know it's wrong. You can't run away from it. They've been lying to their daddy for 22 years about Joseph. They've never told him. He never learned the true story of what happened to Joseph. He thought he was killed. He thinks he's dead. They didn't trust him. I mean, after all, Levi and Simeon, what do? They go into a village and massacre a whole village. These are not trustworthy guys. I don't know what the sins is of your life, but don't hold it in. Don't hold it in. Confess it before God. Ask for forgiveness. God does forgive. He'll deal with it. Or if there is restitution that needs to be made, and you can make restitution where you can. These guys have lived within a community of guilt for all these years, and it's now coming back on them. Joseph heard this. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and he wept. He cried. This is a man of power. This is a man in authority. Guys, it's okay to cry. It's okay to weep. Some of you think it's a sign of weakness to cry. It's a sign of, I don't have it together. Leaders don't cry. Now, he couldn't show them his tears. Later on, he would wail, and all those in the house would hear him cry. Jesus looks over Jerusalem, and he cried over Jerusalem because he knew what was about to happen to Jerusalem. It's okay to cry. Some of you need a good cry. Some of you really need a good cry. Just go cry. When my dad died, I didn't cry. I had to be tough for my family. I had to be the one to do the funeral. You ever do your own dad's funeral? People in the audience are crying, or at the funeral are crying. I'm not. I've got to be tough. It took me 2 years. One day I look at the medals. My dad, he was a B-17 flyer. He won a Distinguished Flying Cross. He had all these medals and all. He 32 missions in a B-17. And I looked up on the wall and saw a picture of him with those medals, and I just broke into tears. It took me 2 years to go there. I don't care how long it takes, but at some point you got to let it out. It's okay. Joseph, why is he crying? These are my brothers. I ought to be hating them. And yet, right before me, they're speaking of what they did to me. And all the anger and all the resentment and all the hatred and these were the bigwigs. And all of a sudden I see him looking at them and saying, they aren't so big. Why did I carry this so long? Why did I let this happen? And he has control. He could have stomped them into the dirt. How many, when I read the Old Testament, I find that happening all the time. A brother all of a sudden takes over power of the kingdom. What's he do? He wipes out all his brothers. So there's no threat. Joseph's not thinking on these terms. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. See, Reuben is the oldest. You would expect him to be the one to stay. But I think when he heard what Reuben said, he took the second in line and had him stay. Should have been Reuben who should have stayed, being the oldest. And then he fills the bags, and many of commentators said he did this to test them. I'm not so sure that's what he's doing. I think he's really concerned for the provisions of the family back home, and it's an act of grace, an act of mercy. And he gives them the provisions, and he puts the money back. Now, it's going to be a testing to them. It's going to be hard on when they find that money back in those bags. And they're going to panic. But I'm not so sure, and I've read a lot of commentaries. They all argue over this. I don't really care. I'm just going to say Joseph wanted to make sure they had provisions and was taking care of family. And they watched him bind Simeon up and throw him into the jail. Then they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed, and as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw the money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, "My money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack." I'm sure they didn't speak with a Brooklyn accent back then, At this their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us? What's this Elohim has done to us? God has done this to us." Maybe because of all the guilt they're having. I don't know. Why do we blame God? Do we blame God for our mishappenings? It's God's fault. That's what they're doing. God, it's your fault, God. What did you do this for me for? When they came to Jacob, and I'm not going to read all this because what they're going to do is just repeat the story and tell the whole story over again. But they tell it to Jacob. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. Not just one of them, all of them. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. All this has come against me. Woe is me." Poor Jacob. Poor Jacob. Is he a man of faith? Is he really a man of faith? I don't see a lot of faith on Jacob's part throughout any of this. You know what I see? I see the faithfulness of God. Even when they're blaming God for their misfortunes, God is doing something big for them to deliver them from the very condition that they're in. And some of you see your circumstances, you see your hardships in life, and you're blaming God. Why, God, did you put me into this? Oh, woe is me. Oh, woe is me. Life is so bad. God put you here for a reason. We were talking about this in Sunday school class today. I'm up in Ruidoso. I loved it up there, man. I loved the grass, the green, and the deer, and the turkey. Reminded me of home. I had 5 acres in Arkansas with a little pond and deer bedding there, and it's beautiful country. I love Tampa, and we're in the desert. We're in the desert. I don't have that. You know what? The desert's a good place to be. The desert's a good place to be. There's beauty in the desert. You just got to look for it. There are good things here. You just got to look for it. And it might be, this might be your 40 years in the wilderness. It might be God is training you up, getting ready to send you into the promised land. Might be. I don't know. Jacob's attitude was, oh, woe is me. Look at this. And Simeon is no more. Simeon isn't gone. Simeon's in Egypt, but he's not dead. And I love Reuben's attitude. Then Reuben said to his father, he's the oldest and he's the biggest doofus in the family. He loses the inheritance because he has a relationship with his daddy's mommy. He bundles the situation with Joseph. He tries to keep the brothers. He says, throw him into a pit. And he's going to return and come back, and he messes it up. It took Judah to help with it. And then he says a stupid thing like this. Notice how dumb this is. Reuben says to his father, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands and I will bring him back to you. What good's it going to do to kill his 2 sons? They're part of the inheritance. What a dumb thing to say. There's grandkids. He's going to kill his 2 grandkids. But this is the way Reuben thinks. He doesn't have his act together, but at least he has the heart to do it. But there's no way in the world that Jacob is going to give any responsibility to Reuben. Reuben just can't do it. But he said, my son shall not go down with you. I'm not going to send Benjamin. For his brother is dead, and he's the only one left. Really? What about all the other brothers? With all of Leah? This is his favorites. Still playing favoritism. He hadn't learned anything. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. So what's he going to do? I'm going to protect Benjamin, and I'm going to leave Simeon down there to rot in prison. Really think about that. Really think about it. Do you play favoritism with your family? Do you? Favoritism is dangerous. Don't do it. Jacob made a mess of his family. Made a mess. When everything looks at its very lowest, there's famine in the land, Simeon's in prison, belief that Joseph's in jail, they're asking for Benjamin to be sent down, there's no food, they don't know what to do, they're going to eat the food that they've been provided. Things are just going to get worse. Worse and worse. But even when things are in the worst, guess who's in control? Guess who's in control? God is in control. God was in control from the first day. God was in control when they threw Joseph into the prison. God was preparing the way for Joseph to go down there and give them relief and bring them out of Canaan and in Egypt for 400 years, fulfilling a promise made to Abraham years and years ahead. He said this was going to happen. And what is he doing? He's protecting this family from themselves because they had already started to assimilate into Canaan. And if things had continued as they would, this family would have become no more than the rest of them. And they would have come under the judgment of God at a later date when the Ammonites got so bad that God was going to have destruction in the land. God is good. God knows what He's doing. I look at this church right now. Many of you aren't going to be here in a year or two. How do you grow a church like that? Jerry's family's going to be leaving in a few months. And Tiffany, or where's Tiffany? Their family going to be leaving probably around February, and we're going to be leaving soon. Many of you guys are. We found one of you going to be going to Kuwait soon, and a bunch of you guys getting ready to go to Afghanistan. I'm a pastor that usually likes to set a plan, set a purpose, and move forward with it, and have everybody behind it. We can't do that with this church. God has a very special purpose in the life of every one of you. All we can do is pray God will keep us going, but I don't care. You know what I care about? I care about what God is going to do in your lives and where you're going and the impact you're going to have where you're going to go. If you stay here, wonderful. We're going to put you to use. All right? We need help. We need deacons. We need all of that. But if it doesn't work that way, this might be just, what is our motto on the website? An oasis in the desert. If that's all we are, if that's what God's will is for us, that's okay. I don't care if we don't become a mega church. Because you know what? There might be one of you sitting in this group today that we minister to you in such a way that you might be a Joseph. You might be a Billy Graham. You might be, but you know, it doesn't matter. It might be one of your kids or your grandchildren will be one of those. And you've had it, and it might be the very impact that we have had in this church that set the stage that is going to make that happen. You might be a total failure in the way you raise your kids and the way you think you've conducted your life. But you know God is good. Jacob was a total failure. And that God preserved Joseph in the midst of all that. Because of a promise that God kept with Abraham, Isaac, and even Jacob. I am not worried about what's going on into the world with the flame of the Islam going on out there. You know why? God is in control. Muhammad was a great-grandchild of Abraham. There were promises to Muhammad, or to Ishmael. He's a descendant of Ishmael. And all this is the fulfillment of what God has planned. And the nation of Israel, it's not going to be destroyed. God knows what He's doing there. I get upset. I get worried. But you know what? This time period for you is no different than the prosperity and famine that was going on for Joseph, Jacob, and the rest. And if you trust in God, you trust in Elohim, you trust in Yahweh, you're His children. He's going to make sure you're cared for. You just have to trust. Believe. He's in control. And you say, but I've fallen down so hard. I've sinned so bad. Oh my goodness. Simeon and Levi wiped out a whole village of people. Who was Levi? Well, Levi, Moses, was a descendant of Levi, and so was Aaron. And God had a very special place for them in the nation of Israel. Every one of those children. So what about you? So you blunder, you fall down, you come back. you come back. And you say to God, you say, God, I blew it. I messed up. I walked out of faith. But I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to cling to you because it's not your faith that's the main point. It's a point. The main point is God's faithfulness. That's the main point. It's not that your faith that saves you as much as Jesus' faithfulness of going to the cross and dying for your sins. That's what saves you. Faith is simply believing it. But the work isn't done by you. It's trusting the work that was done by Him. Are you grasping that? You didn't go to the cross. You aren't the one that suffered and died for your sins. Jesus Christ did the work on your behalf. Why? Because God looked down on you and He said, you can't do it. So I'm sending somebody to do it for you. And what do I get out of Genesis? Out of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob? You can't do it. You're too weak. So I'm doing it for you. And even though you see the worst of things, and famine and hardships, and I got it under control for you. Will you just please trust me? Will you just please trust me? That's what faith means. You say, but I can't. So what do? If you don't trust God, you know what you trust? Trust your wallet. Trust the military. Trust the government. You trust something. And whatever you trust other than God, that becomes your idol. That's your idol. Will you trust God today? Trust what He's doing for you and believe in Him? That's what I get out of Joseph. In the midst of all that he went through, he never stopped trusting God. Will you trust Him today?